Yeah, g'day everyone and welcome back to the TryPod live with Winnie and Clarkey. We are here for our round 13 NRL preview and best bet show. If you're new here, mainly from my Instagram, welcome to this live. We will go through every single game by game. Winnie will provide you some best bets at the start of the show and then we'll break it all down from there. With that in mind, let me welcome the big dog himself. Winnie, how goes it?
I'm going okay, thanks, mate. Decent round 12, 2-1 on best bets, but losing the mixed matchup, which is never fun. However, we got a $13 Winnie's Kitchen SGM, and that's the third hit in 12 weeks so far this season. So that's a positive to take out of it. We had our word on the origin selections. Of course, that's at the forefront of everyone's minds and plays into our round 13 preview. But we knew the Blues team on Sunday night. We talked about it. We knew the Maroons rumours. Tonight will be a shorter pod, so if we leave you wanting more, there's like 30 minutes of origin chat in the recap pod. But I would just say as a final word on the selections before we do our preview in 7 days' time, there is not one single player in either 17 that I saw them and was shocked. Like, I can't believe that player's picked. However, there was one player on each team who I was shocked to see being absent. For the Blues, that's Api Coruscant. Yes, his team sits 16th. I still think he's the best attacking nine on the planet. For Queensland, it's the omission of Dave Fifita. And Billy has explained it. I'm still not quite buying what he's saying and talking about Fifita's form's not as good as last year. That's not really the question. The question is he good enough to be in the team I thought he should be? As a Queenslander, I can say I'm glad Appy's not there, but you tell me, Blues fans, we'd love to hear what you guys reckon in terms of your reaction. Blues fans, you've got to be glad you don't have to face Fifita and not even coming off the bench. Clarkey, before I do best bets, what's your final word on the selections?
Yeah, as a Titans fan, I was naturally disappointed Dave wasn't there. I thought his form was good enough this year, considering he did have a shortened preseason and coming back from that pec injury, missed a few games. Statistically, the best back rower that's available for the Maroons as well, so you could say he's unlucky as far as that's concerned. But I know Billy won't publicly say this, but for me, I believe it could actually be a situation where the Roosters backflip. Billy doesn't kind of want to bring any of that distraction into camp, and I think that makes perfect sense as well. For the Maroons, the team I mostly expected, apart from Selwyn Cobbo on the bench. It's clear that Billy's won 2 in a row now. He knows that his blueprint, his DNA is all over that Queensland side. They're building something special, and he wants to have Cobbo there for depth as he can cover centre, wing, or fullback. Billy said so himself that 4 of the last 6 Origin games he's coached, he's actually lost an outside back. So I do like that move. I agree with you. No real surprises this year. No Tavita Pangai Juniors or anything too surprising. For the Blues, comparing their lineup to the Maroons, Winnie, I probably expect Michael Maguire to almost do the opposite of what he did with the Kiwis in the World Cup final there. Or not the World Cup, sorry, the Pacific Championship final against Australia. I think he wants to make this a dogfight. I think he really wants to use those 4 middles on the bench. Or they're not all middles, sorry. There is Hudson Young, but certainly everyone on his bench, even Hamoli Olakuatu, was capable of playing a middle role. I think he really wants to drag Queensland into an arm wrestle, and he feels his side can win it through there. So it'll be very interesting how that goes, mate. Any final takeaways from yourself?
I'm going to somewhat keep my powder dry because we're going to do a dedicated Origin 1 preview on Tuesday. So in a week from now, you're not going to want to hear us talk about round 14 because Origin will be 24 hours away. So we'll preview game 1, and then you get a bonus pod next week. After Origin, we'll do a little recap of Origin, but mostly look ahead to round 14, which we need to wait till after Origin to know the wash-up and who's available, who's not. As for round 13, it presents a unique challenge. But as I said in the recap, I love rounds like this. I love the uncertainty. I think it's just as hard for bookies as it is for us. So how about I share? I've still got 4 best bets across the 5 games. And there's a lot to talk about in this mouth-watering encounter on Thursday night. Eels Sharks, which I will cover. But I'm going to take Cronulla to bounce back from the humiliation last week. That line has dramatically flipped, so now I get them as an underdog, and the best way to play it, I think, is Sharks plus half a try, which is $1.95 on 365. So even though the Eels have got Gutho and Moses back, and that gives a significant goal-kicking edge when you lose Hines on the Sharks, now I don't have to worry about goal-kicking at all. It doesn't come into the equation with the tries. And I still think Sharks only losing 2 players running top of the ladder, enough to win with. I think they're the slightly better team. Then you want to say, well, Para's at home. To me, I thought a coin flip game, but I'm getting a coin flip price and plus half a try. I feel like I can even win in a tight one. The next night, I am taking Well, I like Newcastle, but my bet is Bulldogs under 3.5 team tries. The Dogs to score 3 or less tries because I think the way Newcastle wins is gritty, defensively, high completions, don't want to be sloppy, kind of like they were against your Titans that gave you a really good sniff. This is back in the Hunter, and the Knights are sorry, I lost my computer froze on me there. The Bulldogs are missing their 3 best players as well, right? Which I think especially is your attacking weapons in Crichton, Burton, Kickow. I think the Knights are the better team. They're at home and coming in off a bye, focusing on defense. So I like Bulldogs under 3.5 total tries, $1.80 on 365. I am taking Penrith on Saturday against the Dragons. But the best way to execute, I believe, is minus 3.5 points in the second half. That's $1.85 Ladbrokes, Neds, and $1.84 on Sportsbet, because I think it's going to be a sloppy start and both teams trying to find their way and figure out new combinations. But what I'm most confident in is that Penrith is going to finish strong and finish over the top of the Dragons. And look at kind of what happened to St. George last time they played against the Dragons. They actually against the Dogs. So they led at halftime, lost the game by 30 points. And finally, later on Saturday night, I take my Fins minus 3.5, $1.90. Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, Neds, and it's a simple handicap for me that I think I've got the better team, even with the Origin omissions accounted for. I've got the Fins at their home suburban ground and wanting to bounce back off real disappointment in a game that they should have won by all rights, given the circumstances and the double-digit lead in New Zealand. But if the Fins are a legit finals footy team, they'll bounce back from that one. They'll take care of business in this one. And I was surprised to see that line was a little bit slim.
Yeah, interesting, mate. So 4 best bets there. The only game you don't have a best bet for is the Roosters and Cowboys there. Just couldn't find anything that stood out or any value there?
Well, I don't come up with a best bet for every game. So that line has moved a lot, as several of these, have. And it's got to a point now where I feel like I've missed the best of it on the Roosters, but I still wasn't confident enough on the Cowboys, as I'm happy to, get into in more detail when we get to that game.
Yeah, interesting. I am keen to go game by game. But before we do that, we're just going to take one moment and we're going to hear from Australia's best looking CEO with some market insights. Of course, I'm talking Mr. Tristan Merlehan.
G'day everyone, it's Tristan Merlehan here from TopSport. I'm getting ready for an indoor cricket game, so I'm in a different venue today, but just giving you the update on the round ahead. It's one of our trickiest rounds to price, with obviously Origin this weekend and a lot of depleted sides in the offering for round number 13. There's been 3 massive goes, with Cronulla going from 5.5 minus into 1.5 plus, so that's been a massive move. The Bulldogs as well, they started favourites. They're now 4.5 point underdogs, and the Panthers have also moved over the key number of 6 from minus 5.5 to minus 7.5. So a few very, very sizable moves. Obviously a bit of uncertainty surrounding the teams until our release today. So we've had our guard up, but obviously getting ready for this round of footy and then into the big game on Wednesday night, where Queensland are slight favourites despite the annual virus in the camp. Queensland is minus 1.5 favourites against the Blues. $1.81 Queensland, $2 New South Wales. So should be a cracking week of football. Good luck if you're having a bet over the weekend, and of course gamble responsibly.
Thank you very much to Tristan there. Now, that was obviously recorded before. What you might have missed was Winnie's best bet. It was Tristan over 5.5 sixes and over 4.5 wickets, which he absolutely went off today. Huge performance there from Tristan. Very, very proud of him here on the podcast. All right, let's move into it, mate. Let's start off at Thursday night, 7:50 p.m. We're at CommBank Stadium. The Eels host the Sharks. Now, the line that you guys will see if you are watching this as a live show will be before team lists dropped. And then I will tell you what that line has shifted to. So early this morning, the line was set at minus 5.5 Sharks, Winnie. It's now swung all the way to the Eels' favour, where they're minus 1.5 favourites. What do you think the main reason for that might have been?
So to me, I actually saw before teams were even listed, that line was into 1.5 with Para still an underdog. And I've gone, okay, Moses is confirmed in, right? Yep. But I still didn't know for sure if Gutho would be in as well. Once the team actually was listed, then I've seen Para been bet into a favourite, which is obviously people had a whiff of that, at least one or if not both of those guys in. But clearly the pair of them, along with Penasini back, has shifted this line 6 points.
Absolutely. In addition to that, Brendan Hands comes in and Joey Lussick drops out of the 17. For the Sharkies, Braden Trindle returns. Nico Hines is out and Toby Rudolph is back on the bench. These sides meet for the first time this year, Winnie. They met one time last year. It was 30-26 there. The Eels are at home here, but it feels like you think the Sharkies can get the job done.
Make a good point. They haven't played for a long time because that was the opening round of the season last year, if I do recall correctly.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And it's an awesome game to kick off the abbreviated round. Like, as I said, knew something was cooking, as Arthur did allude to in his press conference. So we can talk about whether that market was efficient enough when it opened this morning at 5.5. You got a steal if you got on Parramatta. We can only play it what it's available to us right now, where I actually think it's moved a little bit too far. You know, Gutho originally, I thought it sounded like he'd be out for a couple of months, needed that surgery, but it's only ended up being about a month on the sidelines. And Moses comes in as well, Penasini. Like now you're talking about Para that's basically full strength, other than Hopgood, of course, on origin duty, right? So even though it's Para 15th on the ladder, like when they've got all these players available, they're obviously a lot better than that position. And then you compare it to the Sharks, who are top of the ladder. Yes, they do lose two key leaders, but that's not bad for a team sitting at the very top to only have to cover 2 losses. And I feel like the Sharks off a humiliating home defeat makes them even more dangerous this week, though you could also say that these leaders for Para coming back in will give the Eels a boost as well. So I'm kind of expecting both these sides to be able to fire their best shot here. My very first question, not usually the question you need to ask when you first place 15th, is who's the better team? So I'm going through the lists and I'm going, well, the Sharks still have the best back 5, but the Eels clearly have the better halves pairing with Moses able to partner Brown. You can say Cronulla's fortunate to have Trindle. He is available now, waiting in the wings, comes back in. I like the Sharks pack, but it is close. I also favour the Sharks bench. Again, I don't think it's by much. You still got the likes of a Sean Lane, who was in the rep discussions, a year or 2 ago, and he's on the pine for Parramatta. You feel, again, the influential players back for Para, they can draw a line in the sand. They can say, yeah, we've been awful for the last month, but, the boys are back and we can show what we're really about in front of our paying members. However, again, the manner of Cronulla's loss, you definitely expect a response. I've got Cronulla as a slightly better team, but then I am going to acknowledge I'm in a CommBank, and I'm going to basically call this a pick'em for me. And that's why I took plus half a try at $1.95. I mean, you've got bookies that have got Cronulla at $2 to win, but why would you bet $2 to win when you could bet plus half a try? It's very unlikely you're going to win scoring less tries. In fact, Cronulla is the opposite over the last few years. They've been the type of team that will score more tries than the opponent and lose, right? And you can certainly lose a tight game and score the same number of tries as well. So I do think it's a good way to play it if you even lean Cronulla in this matchup. As much as Gutho and Moses are back, it's like, could they be a little rusty? Could they be a little short on match fitness? It wouldn't be the worst time to oppose Para and just find out. On the other hand, I completely appreciate Moses could be man of the match here. And then the crazy thing about that, if Moses comes out and has a masterclass, people will already be replacing Hines in Origin before a ball's even been kicked in game 1 and saying, well, Moses was fit, Moses should have been picked. So I suppose get ready for that storyline. I'm looking at the players that missed rep selection too for big games. Look, the old guard, have we seen the last of RCG, Barlow in the Blues? If they have big games, I don't think there's that much gap between them and other props that were selected. But then there's new kids with aspirations to play Origin who would be disappointed, the likes of Ramian, Brayley too, who I think could be in for big ones. So again, I see it dead set 50-50, and that includes the fact that I think, Moses might kick one more goal than Trindle in this. Try a handicap. I evade that issue, and I like that play.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to play, and it's when you add the context to it, I really like what you've done there. Ryan from Facebook also added that it's the Manor Cup, and I did forget to mention that in the preview. For those that aren't aware, Johnny Manor, a former prop in the NRL, sadly passed away to cancer. He did play for both the Sharks and the Eels, so these two teams do battle in honour of him for a cup every year, so very special there. For me, Winnie, I do like the Eels here, which is probably going to surprise a lot of people, especially with how critical I was of them in the preview show and realistically the recap show last week as well. But I do love the returns for their side, most noticeably, of course, Mitchell Moses and Clint Gutherson. And as you said, for Mitchell Moses in particular, the origin dream isn't over for 2024. There's a few other players you can put in that category. You essentially named them all. I don't know if you've been reading my notes, mate, or what, but things can change very fast with an origin loss, right? Particularly in game one, because it's do or die in game two. So there's a fair few players throughout both these lineups, but I think there are more so for the Eels. I look at a Sharks side with that Nico Hines and Cam McInnes, and I'm not too sure what I'm going to get. Whereas I do know an Eels side with Gutherson and Moses is, I wouldn't say on par with the top 8 sides based on what we saw this year, but certainly I've seen enough to know that they can compete with most rosters. Without Hines, without Cam McInnes, I'm just unsure how the Sharkies are going to look here. Now, of course, they're going to be desperate. That's absolutely a factor we have to consider. But I also think the Eels, having lost 5 in a row, I think they might have a sense of desperation as well. Like, it kind of is almost backs to the wall stuff for them, especially in a week where Gutherson is still talking to the media saying, we all believe we're going to play finals still, which seems crazy to a lot of us. But there is still that belief seemingly there for the Eels. When you look at this one statistically, the Eels are averaging 19 points per game and the Sharks concede 18. So there should be about 3 tries there for the Eels, I believe, especially with Mitchell Moses back. The issue is the Eels have conceded at least 30 points in 6 of their last 7. So if they don't turn up defensively here, I've got no doubts that the 3 tries they average will simply not be enough against this Sharks side. I'm going to trust that the Eels do turn up defensively and respond for the first time under their new coach and Trent Barrett with the added troops that are coming back there. So I am going to tip Eels. My tip here said Eels at the line because I want a buffer. Unfortunately, I don't get that buffer anymore. So it's just Eels head to head, but I would have loved to have got on here and got a +5.5 tip in for you all. Alrighty, let's move on to the next game. Friday night, 8 p.m. We're at McDonald Jones Stadium there in Newcastle where the Knights host the Doggies. The line was -5.5 for the Knights before team lists. It's now moved into -4.5. They welcome back Daniel Saifiti, so Jack Hetherington drops out and Christian Maipalangi returns at centre. Bradman Best, of course, sidelined with that hamstring injury. For the Doggies, no Matt Burton, Drew Hutchinson in, Carraz to centre, Wilson to the wing, Stephen Crichton, their captain, out. Interesting stat for this one, Winnie. These sides have met 45 times throughout history, 22 wins on either side, and a draw. So the winner here does go ahead on the official all-time win-loss head-to-head record. And it's a tough game to pick, isn't it, mate? Because in 2023, the Knights smoked them badly twice, like 100-6 or something really bad. But then they met early this year, and the Dogs, they didn't smoke them, but they definitely impressed with a 36-12 point victory. I forgot your best bet on this one, mate. Do you think they can repeat that here?
Yeah, that was a smoking, and I actually didn't mention that, but it's another factor where I feel like that was definitely revenge being served by the Bulldogs. People may remember I was on the Doggies on that Sunday Arvo 6 weeks ago when they met, and now it's flipped because now the Dogs actually demolished the Knights. That was the last time Newcastle lost a game as well. So I feel they will feel like they owe Canterbury one. And, another point with Origin is this 18th man missing the round is brutal, which is a relatively modern aspect. And it's usually a playmaker. I know Queensland may not put a playmaker in their 18th man jersey because they already carry kind of like the Hunt Grant tandem. So if you lose a half, but most teams don't have halves cover on their bench. So you'd want that 18th man, if there's multiple HIAs or if there's foul play. However, I bring up the fact that it's often a playmaker because it isn't the first time that Matt Burton will miss a Bulldogs game because he's 18th man for the Blues. And this is a Canterbury team. Now you tell me if this comes to the top of your head, but when was the last time the Bulldogs played finals footy? Right, this is a club that's on a serious finals drought. I'm thinking it hasn't happened in the 2020s. So I can see you're looking it up. You let us know, right? But these are the kind of games that can make the difference. 2 teams that are fighting to be top 8, and you don't get to have Matt Burton. And Matt Burton may not play a minute on Wednesday night. And in addition to that, Critter you knew would be out, but then Kickout was injured as well. Now, the Knights are without their best, that is Bradman Best, injured his hammy. Magic Round's still not right, but not to overly confuse you guys, you're well aware also that the Knights' best player is Callum Ponga, and he remains out. However, you wouldn't know it from Newcastle's form, would you? KP goes out in that Dogs game. Newcastle hasn't lost since. That's 4 wins in a row and a bye. They are the rightful favourites. Like you said, it's a tough game to pick. Actually, to me, it wasn't that tough. I mentioned revenge factor, but I've got Newcastle's in great form. Armstrong's been excellent. I know the Knights have their hands full dealing with Cherry, Kiraz, Adokar, but like at least Crichton's not there. And it comes back to what supply are outside backs getting from the halves. Sexton, I don't mind him, but of course Hutchison comes back into the halves now. It's not an awe-inspiring halves combination. The Knights get to keep their regular halves combo. And I think Newcastle's clearly got the better pack. While I'm a big fan of Jacob Preston. Salmon's been a really good pickup for Canterbury. I'm looking at a Knights team. You've got both Saifis available, which feels pretty rare this year. You've got these internationals that you don't have to worry about Origin with Kai Pierce-Paul, Leo Thompson. Frizzell was playing Origin a year ago, right? He's on the bench for Newcastle. It gives you an idea of their depth. So I feel like I'm back in the team that's stronger right now. He's on a roll, is off a bye, and at home where they play well. And there could be a little bit of rain, which could suppress scoring. That's why I took under 3.5 Dogs tries, because that's the way Newcastle knows how to win. Magic Round was a bit of an outlier, I think, with all that scoring. And I think, if anything, that would make defence a focus for the Knights, because they look at these games and say, if we complete at a high level and we defend, at a high level, we can defend our way to victory. And while the Knights were sitting out, they watched their upcoming opponent, Canterbury, score 40+ in round 12. So I think the game plan coming in is Newcastle is going to want to restrict the Dogs. I think they can. I think they cover the 4.5 as well. I just slightly preferred the under if it's a real arm wrestle type match.
Okay, it's good that you've got a strong lean there. When I looked through this one, I couldn't really get a strong lean either way. And part of that's because the Doggies' defense has been really good this year. I'm not sure how it will look if you take Crichton and Burton out. I don't think it fundamentally changes too much. Like, Hutchinson's an okay defender. Kiraz has played at centre this year as well. So I don't think it'll change too much there. Actually, the only side that's conceded less than the Bulldogs this year is the Penrith Panthers. So that is brilliant for Cameron Ciraldo there. I can definitely see a world where they do limit this Knights side. Where I have the big concern over the Bulldogs is in Magic Round, after they lost to the Raiders. I came on here and I tipped the Dragons last week and said the Bulldogs look tired. They then faced the Dragons coming off the bye. Didn't matter too much. Now they face the Knights coming off the bye. So it's 2 or 3 weeks in a row now where their first team's coming off the bye. And I think that is a little bit tough on them for the draw. I'm also in two minds about the injured star kind of theory that was thrown out on this podcast when Ponga went down. This time for the Bulldogs, and not quite in that full effect of an injured star, but taking Burton and Crichton out, I think it kind of, plays the same similar role where do the rest of the Doggies step up in their absence and go to a new level for their skipper and best player? Or is it safe to say that the core of their team is gone and therefore they will struggle? That's why I'm so undecided here. I've got a lot more question marks over the Bulldogs. I think they could be really good and surprises, but it could go the complete other way. I believe in their defense, and I actually don't think the Knights' attack is too brilliant without Ponga. They actually have averaged less points scored per game than the Doggies this year, and we don't look at the Doggies as an attacking side. So I think that sums it up. My tip here, Winnie, I'm going to go a full-time draw. At 80 minutes, this game will be drawn, and we will go to Golden Point in Newcastle. Now, I know that's a super bold play. I don't expect anyone to back that with money. But, yeah, the Knights, I don't think their win streak will end, but it will switch from a win streak to an undefeated run if they were to go full 90 minutes there. How much does a draw pay out of interest?
Well, 90-minute draw or an 80-minute draw?
Both, if you know.
I don't think bookies even really offer the 90-minute, but the 80-minute result you'll typically get about 25-1.
That's not
for
that
a game
good.
to be level. Yeah, I think it does happen about 1 in 30 games. And, if it's lower scoring and if it's a shorter line, it's slightly more likely to happen. But I just think you've made great points there about this is the 3rd straight week that the Dogs have to play a team off the bye. That has to take a toll because the opponent is always fresher than you. And I also really like your point there that an underrated factor about what makes the Dogs quite competitive is their defense. Well, if I'm playing the Bulldogs under 3.5 tries, I don't have to worry about how good the Bulldogs defense is. Like, that doesn't concern me. In fact, if anything, if the Bulldogs defend well, it helps me Because if the Bulldogs are keeping the Knights to a low score, the Knights are also going to have to be desperate in keeping the Dogs down to have any chance. Extra time, fine by me for something like 16 all. And of course, you get to extra time, you can't cover the line of 4.5. So I'm kind of seeing a scenario where while I still think Newcastle wins it by a converted try or more, I think lower scoring as well. You bake those in together, and the best way to play it, Dogs tries under.
And especially if the Knights do have a patient attack, they don't necessarily throw it around and take too many risks. They grind you down, right? And we've just said there how good statistically the Doggies are. So it definitely could be a world where the Knights are attacking, can't quite get over the line. Bulldogs are defending their hearts out, but fatiguing. And then when it comes to attack, they don't have that spark that they usually do. They don't have that energy to get down the other side of the field. So although my tip is different to yours, if you break down the context of it, we're kind of on the same page of how we're seeing that game break down. And don't forget, for that game, we'll also have an exclusive Better Same Game multi crafted by Winnie himself. Better also provide NRL talk and tips in the Fox Sports Lab, which you can check out on their YouTube channel each Wednesday. And always importantly, think, is this a bet you really want to place? For free and confidential advice, call the number or visit the website in the show description. Winnie, I'm going to guess your same game multi right here. It's going to be Dogs under 4.5 tries, total match points under 40, and David Armstrong anytime try scorer. That's my prediction right here. You can't do it now because I've said it, but I'm wondering if you would.
Oh, I mean, that you just made the point there that even though you know who I like and I just described how I see the game playing out, the thing about same game multis is there's infinite combinations, isn't there? When you got alt lines, do you go tries, do you go points, which player, right? And that's been a bright spot in this season is my best bet record, as you can see on the screen. Below Clarkey is atrocious, but same game as we are up, 12 units of whatever you can play. You're placing on same gamers.
Yeah, exactly. And when we talk about the 9-year winning record, that has that typically included multis in the past, or is that strictly just best bets?
That's just like the best bet record per season. We've had plenty of years with great multi returns, but we've also had a season where we had a losing record on money you've put on multis, even though we had a great positives in best bets. So they should be aligned. Clearly, every game that I've nailed a same game has hinged off a best bet. But again, with the variance, sometimes your best bets can win, but you just can't quite jag that extra leg for the same gamers. Or sometimes you're not going that well on best bets like this year, but the ones I have gotten, I've been done well enough to, get double-digit odds and win a few winners over the line.
100%.
And as people are commenting, nowadays the draw is only $14 on Sportsbet. That, I haven't really monitored that. And there's comments like Harry Potter says used to be priced. You're right. Back in the day, I used to search around if I liked a game to be a draw. I could often find a $34 for a draw. And at the very least, you'd find a $26. And I don't know if draws are that much more common these days. But $14 is criminal, honestly.
Yeah, there's just not enough value in there. It doesn't seem for the likelihood. I haven't broken that down from a data perspective, but just from the top of my head, we've been to Golden Point 3 times this year. Under 10. Under 5, really. We've been to Golden Point under 5, surely. And then
no one would probably have that on the top of their head, but someone let us know, right? Someone do us a favor and tell us how many games there've been this season, right? Which is, we're 12 rounds in. So what we're 12 times 8. Yep. And how many games have gone to Golden Point so far, right? That would be 96 games? Anyway, let us know in the comments. So I'd be interested to hear that as we move to Saturday.
Very keen to hear that if someone doesn't mind. Saturday, 5:30 p.m, Bluebet Stadium. The Panthers host the Dragons. The line was set at -6.5 against the Panthers. That's now moved out to -7.5 following team lists. They've moved Dane Laurie to fullback, and interestingly enough, Brad Schneider was named to return, despite reports he needs a few more weeks for that knee. For the Dragons, the Fear Guy brothers are in. That's because Ravalawa and Bird are out. Ben Hunt is in Origin camp, so Jesse Marshke moves to halfback. Both the Couchman twins are on their bench with no Jaden Sewer. All right, Winnie, the Panthers have won their last 6 in a row over the Dragons, who have lost their last 10 in a row without Ben Hunt. it seems a simple one to tip, and you agree with your best bet, right?
Yeah, initially you don't necessarily see it simple because you look at all the names that are out for Penrith, but they are pretty accustomed to playing without 5 stars around this time of year. However, it's closer to it's closer to 7 from the first team when you obviously count Cleary is out and Taylor May. Eisenhuth would be, in the strongest 17 as well, right? So that's a far cry from your best possible Penrith. But then you look at the Dragons, who aren't close to Penrith in talent or depth, and they're missing 3 rep players, plus, as you said, Bird, Sele, Ravalawa. So I don't want to sound too harsh, but that's a pretty sorry-looking Dragon side. Like, that's probably just close to the weakest side that's lined up this season on paper. Understandably, because given the week, but still. And you're a team that's off a horror second half against the Dogs. Now, I don't always rush out to bet on teams that are off their worst performance because usually there's motivation to remedy that. But there's only so much the Dogs can do. And they're coming against a Penrith team where it's funny. How do you judge Penrith's form? Because Penrith comes in off one of the best wins they've had in this whole 3-year reign, I believe, what they did on Saturday night, which I certainly didn't see coming. Given the circumstances, right, phenomenal win. But, how do you judge that form when half the team's, swapped out? So I do think there could be a struggle for combinations. And there's an argument. If there's people watching who want to take the Dragons and take the points, they're just going to say, so much chopping and changing. Both sides are a lot very under strength, and therefore it's unpredictable, and just take the points because sides will struggle with their chemistry and with executing the opportunities that are presented. But I don't know. I look at Penrith. I'm kind of like, Cole has got an opportunity. So has Schneider. They've been introduced because Cleary's been out a while. Luai's missed games this year. I look at St. George. I'm like, where are they going to generate offense from? A lot of pressures on Sloan. Tyrell Sloan's definitely the key. But Penrith loses their best form player of the year in Edwards, but Laurie's a very handy replacement to have at the back. And then you go to the forward pack, which is the Dragons' strength. That's their best attribute, but it's more than mitigated by a pack that I would still say is better than half the comp this weekend for Penrith. A team that has Leota, Kenny, Fish, Sorensen, Smith. That's the envy of half the comp when the other sides are at full strength. So therefore, I liked Penrith. I'd play the -6.5. And then when I thought about it a bit further, I thought especially the longer this game goes on, I think it's going to want to be on Penrith, who are at home, to wear the Dragons down and to roll over the top. And if the Dragons are any hope, it's probably a strong start. So I just avoid the start. Whatever happens in the first 40, you actually almost want Penrith you want it to be tied or Penrith to be down. You certainly don't mind when you're laying the second half line. But if Penrith are up 10 or 12 at half time, you're not dead by any means because they're the type of team that can be pretty ruthless. So -3.5 there, the second half line, $1.85 Ladbrokes Ned's sports bet.
I think one thing we know about Panthers, whether they are full strength or missing players, they do play out the full 80. There was times this year, I think it was the Tigers game, you would have thought for sure Tigers are going to cover, but the Panthers just keep coming. Even when it's the 75th minute, they're still looking to score. So it is always of benefit, I believe anyway, to be on the Panthers covering lines. Thank you very much to Corey Davil from Instagram. He has told us 3 out of the 96 games this year have been golden points. So that sums up our thoughts earlier. That's not good value.
Call, Clarky, there when you said 3. So what's that strike rate? That's 1 in 30, which is exactly what I said. I told you it's roughly a 1 in 30, yeah? And usually I thought you could get $25, which $25 is fine if you pick the right games that are going to be close, because you got to think maybe only 1 in every 30 goes to golden point. But sometimes when a team is a 20-point favorite, those games basically never go to golden point, right? So you can pick your spots. But from what we're hearing, not that I check that market religiously, but the bookies have tightened that right in, probably because it used to be probably a bit more of a lazy pricing of just make every game $25, and maybe they have been picked out on the opportune moments, and that's sad to see, because I used to like to play at that if you could get nice juicy odds. Good way to play bonus bets, things like that. But But yeah, hasn't it occurred 3? You've laid it all on the line and suggested it could occur again in round 12. I noticed a comment that I didn't type the best bets. I should do that just to reinforce what they are. And you can talk about the nightcap Saturday night.
Yeah, perfect, mate. I'll cover this game and get us into the next one while you type up the best bets there for us. So I was actually going to tip the Dragons here if they had Ben Hunt. And I know that's kind of crazy, but I wasn't going to tip them because they're good or consistent. It was actually the opposite, because they're so inconsistent. If Ben Hunt was here, I was like, well, this could kind of be the game where they just suddenly play good again when we don't expect them to, like they did against the Warriors. That being said, guys, that was only a gut feel. He's not there. I said the stat earlier. They've lost their last 10 in a row without him. I think it's pretty obvious here that will become 11 in a row without Ben Hunt. Panthers are also very dominant at home. We forget it because they're so dominant everywhere, I suppose, but they have won 13 of their past 14 NRL games at this venue, and they are also very dominant in daytime games. I don't have that stat exactly. I remember I said it on the podcast a few weeks ago. It was a little bit cherry-picked, but their record in daytime Saturday games is exceptional. I think they ride the momentum from last week. They got a lot of momentum last week, absolutely smoking the Sharkies. Now, it's not the same side, but it is the same club. I think they can keep the good times rolling here with a dominant win over the Dragons. So my tip is Panthers to cover the line, but it is worth noting that it's now moved to -8.5 on Toppy. So the punters continue to bring the money in there for Penrith, which makes perfect sense based off what we both
and you know, like if that line has moved in the time that we've talked about, whether we've had influence on that or not, now the second half line is going to be, getting up to 4.5 in places. And that's a significant difference. Like we talk about those even numbers are key numbers. Well, they're key numbers over 80 minutes of footy. They're even more key over 40 minutes of footy, like the likelihood that Penrith could win the second half by exactly 4. So if you're saying that's moved on Toppy, if people like the sound of that bet, it's always the case. If you like the sound of my bet, I wouldn't wait. Jump on. But again, could understand if you don't like the sound of my bet or you don't trust him as much this year either. Still up, of course, I hate losing that much, trust me. So I'm going to give myself what I think is the best chance to win. And I am going to put my 4 plays up on the screen now for you to check out and let us know what you reckon in the comments.
Perfect, mate. My final point for this Panthers game, Brad Schneider, just wait and see there, guys. NRL Physio did report earlier this week he's still a couple of weeks away. And I did notice they named a rookie halfback on the bench there, the Panthers did. So there could be a case where Schneider drops out closer to kickoff. That could influence the market. I don't think it will too much, though. Alrighty, let's move to the Saturday game, mate. Saturday, 7:35 p.m. We're at KO Stadium. The Dolphins host the Raiders, and the line is set at -3.5 against the Dolphins. I believe that has moved now, and it was the same when we started this show, but you have since handed out a best bet, and it's now moved to -4.5, correct? So potentially we have influenced the market a little bit there. For the Dolphins, of course, no Hammer and no Felice Kaufusi in Origin. So that means Mike Nichols starts. Trey Fuller, the guy we all love to watch, he returns. And Anthony Milford, the guy that we probably don't all love, joins the bench. For the Raiders, Josh Papali'i is back from his suspension. Alrighty, Winnie, it's your boys here. The Finns are back at their spiritual home ground in Redcliffe. It's a venue where they did beat the Raiders last year as well. I believe they were underdogs in that one because the Raiders shocked the Knights in round 1. But the Finns got it done against them last time here, and you think history will repeat itself in this one.
And this is after a massive opportunity was missed a week ago, as I said. I don't want to take away from New Zealand, but it's just like half the Warriors team was out, and the Finns led at 16-6. You got to win that one. That hurts. But you probably got to beat a Newcastle side without Ponga when you're at home too. It's funny. The Finns have let some opportunities slip when they're favourites, but they have bounced back and redeemed those with less likely victories. And this one still should be expected. As I said at the beginning of the show, like most people would probably agree the Dolphins are the better team. Whether they feel that – who else is out for Origin? The Hammer and Kaufusi is 18th man. So that's not a huge losses for Origin for a team that's now I can't think. Are they still top 4 technically?
Yeah, 4th.
Okay, even though they lost, still 4th on the ladder in Queensland where there isn't as much depth to draw on, and only 2 players in Origin. And really, Felice Kaufusi might not even play in Origin. Like I wouldn't be shocked if Kaufusi was released and it really went a different direction with 18th man. Right, well, we'll see anyway. I'm not counting on that. Now, Hamiso is a superstar player, but as crazy as it is to say, you just mentioned it, it's not that great of a loss when you have Fuller as the deputy. Hudson Young is a massive loss for Canberra too, but at least they do get back Big Papa from suspension. The key to me is, can we call the Dolphins a good team? Because if they're a good team, they're coming off a bad loss. And a good team is going to shake off that disappointment. They're going to come home. They're going to take care of business. When the game is on the line, -3.5, basically just need them to win or just beyond a couple of points. I'm looking at the key position players in the spine to just come up with that one extra moment, win by one try. And to me, Isaiah Katoa, Marshall King, the best two spine players on the field. I know that Strange has had an unreal rookie season, and there were even people tossing his name in Origin calculations. So for me, that's I still think Katoa is the best half in this game, and Marshall King the best 9. Arguably Fuller the best fullback too, because I'm never afraid of what Rapana what threat he may pose, even though I know he's the consummate professional. Look, both sides, frisky backs. We talk about like Herbie's so good, but Timoko as well. And the Raiders' strength is the forward pack, so I don't want to dismiss that, but definitely feel like the Finns have showed the ability to kind of absorb strong, powerful forward packs. I can kind of think of the Para pack comes to mind, where they'll, even if they're hammering you early, it's like Dolphins don't seem to blink, and Plath returned from injury last week, and I think the Dolphins have the better bench too and keep coming. And it's only the second game that the Dolphins actually play in their suburban home of Redcliffe. Last time they smoked St. George. It's a short line to me. I'm going to check my phone if it's moved to like 4.5 across the board, because everywhere was 3.5 when we started the pod. And again, like, we definitely have an influence on the market. I'm not going to say every time any line moves that we've caused it. And this year more than ever, we shouldn't be moving the line as much, because bookies should be fair to stick to their opinion and take us on. They would have profited so far if they had done that. But it's an opportunity for anyone that disagrees with me. You disagree with my 3.5 on the Finns, go and help yourself to 4.5 with the Raiders.
And that is a key movement there, from a 3.5 to a 4.5. If you do prefer the Raiders in this one, mate, you've talked me into it. That's why I was looking down at my phone there. I took $1.76 on Toppy for Dolphins -3.5. So slightly under our best bet allowance, which is $1.80 or more. But I'll take it regardless, mate. You have talked me into it. The Finns, back at their spiritual home ground here in Redcliffe. As I said, it's a venue where they have beaten the Raiders before. And I do believe this Raiders side will be desperate to make amends for their showing against the Roosters. There are times this year where they've been disappointing and suddenly responded. And we spoke about it a few weeks ago, where it's really looking at the calendar for the Raiders, because they're up and down and trying to pick the spots where Ricky will have them up and have them ready. The issue is, I think they're at a point of their season where the players have kind of accepted that they've hit their ceiling without Jamal Fogarty. And so they could come to this one motivated. But as will the Dolphins. As you said, they should have won last week. Wayne Bennett is the master of turning things around in 1 week. He did it for the Maroons in 2020 with the worst side ever. He did it for England when they were smoked by Australia in the tournament, lost by 2 points in the final. And those are big-time games where Bennett's been able to influence and have that effect. So to have it here on his side, returning home with a full-strength spine, if you include Fuller there, which I believe is a really handy replacement. I don't want to overcomplicate things either. The Dolphins are at home. They're in Queensland. So for mine, they play their best footy there and they win this one. It's as simple as that. They've only lost one of their 4 games at Redcliffe to date, and statistically, they were better in every single area than the Raiders so far this year. My tip here is Dolphins at the line, and I do like Trey Fuller to score. I just love the energy he brings onto that field when replacing the hammer. Always up around the footy, fit as a fiddle, goes the full 80. I like Fuller to score.
And for those who are interested in the market movements, like Clarkey, 4.5 now on Toppy, which I think is probably the sharpest indicator of the market. But, you've gone and taken $1.76, but it is still $1.90 on, let's say, Ladbrokes Neds. It has shifted down 7 cents on Sportsbet, still 3.5.
I'm a top sport man.
I know, so loyalty, mate, but you got to shop around if you can. But play whatever's available to you. But I believe that line will be above 4 everywhere by the weekend, but we'll see.
Fair enough, mate. All I'm going to say is Ladbrokes and Neds aren't putting on punt parties with blackjack, free beers, and free food. Thank you very much again, Tristan. That was an awesome arvo. Alrighty, final game of the round, Sunday, 4 p.m. We're at Allianz Stadium where the Roosters host the Cowboys. This line opened at minus 15.5 this morning, and it's now moved to minus 17.5 by the time we started this show. For the Roosters, Junior Ponga moves to centre. They got a new bench of Tupanua, Wong, Michael Jennings, and Sandon Smith, so 2 utilities on the bench there. For the Cowboys, Chester and Burns are in. Clifford moves to the halves, and Jakey Granville, the premiership-winning hooker, is back in his preferred jersey. These sides only met once last year, and the Cowboys did win by 14 points there, but they meet this year under different circumstances. It seems a really simple tip for me when you're in the head-to-head department. Do you see it any differently?
Oh, so yeah, simple in the head-to-head for sure. I mean, the Roosters at home, and it's got a few outs, but this is definitely the game where the best way to play it was like the Undertaker did in our group, where he took the 10.5. Now, let us know, Undertaker. I want to say he picked it Saturday, perhaps Sunday. The best way to play this game was probably to hit the Roosters line the second that you heard the rumours that Gerbo was captain, because that was the tip-off that Teddy wasn't going to get picked, therefore would be available for the Roosters. Now we know everyone who's in and out. All right, we always knew Angus Crichton and Lindsay Collins would be out for the Roosters. If you bet early, you were kind of hoping Swally may not get picked, but he was probably leaning towards being in the team. Lenu's a surprise, so that's a net negative. But what about Teddy? Like, neither of us had him in the team, but he was probably 50-50, which is why it was so key whether he was going to be in or out. That should pretty much dictate your bet. You worry about the matchup later. So I guess I'm saying not all the selections went the Roosters' way, not all of them, but it was probably worst-case scenario for North Queensland. When you consider, you knew they were going to lose Nanai, I should say, Cotter and Holmes, but Taulagi to be preferred on the wing, Dearden to get picked over Mam wasn't a certainty. Robson over Appy, a big one as well. So I'm interested what the line kind of was on Monday and how much it moved off the back of the Queensland team being confirmed. As you say, now it's 17.5. And I'm not here to say the line's gone too far either. Like, maybe it hasn't gone far enough. It's just gone too far for me to play the Roosters. You got to give it up at some point. Like, you can say they're definitely the right side, but at some point the line increases too far where you say, right, well, the Cowboys don't have a lot to like, but they've still got Drinky. I guess these young players they're going to be leaning on, like Chester, Vilea. Clifford's not that young anymore, but gets an opportunity. You know, the pack, Neem, Lukey, Finney, Fuyaki, these guys will rip in. But you get a Roosters team again that's at home that retains their first choice spine, plus Manu's absolutely on fire at centre. And a pack that's deep where you bring in the likes of Wong and Tupanua on the bench, and they'd be making first grade anywhere else. What's the stats now? The Roosters, I don't know if you're going to quote this, but averaging over 40 a game, right? That continues after the win that you saw in person. They're a frightening side. There's a setback against Cronulla where really the attack wasn't the problem, it was the defense. But like, we're seeing them score 40 plus, like 7+ tries every week. And 17.5 seems like a lot, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 18.5 by Sunday. And I'm begrudgingly passing this because it's a lot of points now, but just get that feeling that, 25 minutes in, it's going to be 16-0 or 16-4 to the Roosters, and then it's going to feel like light work. So if you still love the Roosters, you haven't played it yet, I'm not going to talk you out of it. And very, very short odds. We've seen some big upsets this season, but I could not imagine this Roosters team being rolled, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the line is at a point where, and I should note in our pre-season show, you had the Roosters as a top 4 side, and I think you had the Cowboys outside the 8, more towards the bottom 4, not even kind of close to that top 8, right? Do you remember exactly where you had the Cowboys?
Let's double check that. No, I'd have to double check that. I actually feel like I did have the Cowboys in the top 8.
Okay, I swear with the Cowboys, I remember you may be saying something like you're not sure how much better they can get than what you saw in 2022, and that's why you had them out. But my memory could be wrong there.
But regardless, they're a top 4 side though. They don't need to be much better than that.
Yeah, Yeah, maybe I am remembering that wrong. But one thing I know I'm not remembering wrong is you have been huge on the Roosters for a lot of this year and
For
confident
sure.
on them.
Yeah.
And I think this line's at a point now where, 17 and a half, probably 18 and a half some places. I could play it for the Roosters, not as a tip. What I can tell you is I would not be betting on Cowboys plus 18 and a half. I've got no faith the Cowboys, but I don't know, mate. For that reason, maybe you could go the Roosters. It's a tough line. It's a very tough line. How do I have this one? I've got the Roosters here. Absolutely, the market agrees. It's the largest line of the round. Here's the stat that really concerns me. Cowboys are averaging 26 points against them so far this year, and the Roosters are scoring an average of 30 points. And those stats are very similar in terms of what one side concedes versus what one side scores. That spells big trouble for the Cowboys. And that's a snapshot of 12 games now. Like, we're not 4 games in and, a side could have been off for a few weeks and that influences those stats. We are 12 games into this season and the Cowboys are averaging almost 30 points per game. That's really, really bad for the NRL. Shocking. I have a feeling as well with Teddy missing Origin, not only will he have a blinder and play exceptional in this one, but his teammates around him will almost feed off that energy and intensity because they do respect their captain so much and kind of rise to his level. So I expect a lot of the Roosters players to have a great game here. Cowboys have struggled bad in Sydney. They've lost 3 of their last 4. That includes a 34-point loss to the Sharks, so they didn't turn up, and a loss to the Eels, which actually remains Para's last victory. It was the Cowboys. I think it was 27-20 or something like that. Of course, they did have a big win over the Dragons in Sydney earlier this year, round 3 or something like that. But clearly the Dragons are not in the same caliber as the Roosters, and Anzac Day taught us that much. I don't think anyone could argue that.
Don't forget the Dragons led that game 24-8. And Fatala Mariner, dead set, muffed a try that would have given them like a 20-point lead as well before that game did swing.
So you could say the Cowboys, I wouldn't say they got lucky because it is such a big turnaround, but they didn't start that game well. And if you don't start a game well against the Roosters, like we saw last round with the Raiders, you're probably going to get put to the sword because they do hang in there for the full 80. I've got a big Roosters victory here. Oh, that line's just so hard to touch, man. But I'd be comfortable with 13 plus. And then a Manu and Teddy anytime try scorer. Joey always goes to a new level this year. Typically he's versing players that are replacing the Origin players out in the centers there, and he roams around the field. So I like him to score. And I think Teddy kind of picks himself as a try scorer. He'll be hungry as ever to send a message there to Michael Maguire. And there's nothing to say Teddy couldn't possibly return for game 2 either. So that's big reasons for him to go well. All right,
another reason that Teddy hasn't played a club game at this time of year for about 7 or 8 years. I definitely agree that like all his teammates revere him and will definitely lift for him. You know what? I've even got a bonus tip for us. That on this game, our man Nicole has a play, and it's a try from an unlikely source. Let's have a listen.
Hey everyone, it's Nicole from Wiki. Hope you guys are pumped up for State of Origin. What is it now? 8 days away. We do have a round of NRL to come, and I'm only going to go with one tip this week. It's a long shot. It obviously may not come up, but I don't care. Griffin Neame. I absolutely love Griffin Neame. He scored 3 times the first try in the second half when he used to be a bench in only about 50 games. He's obviously now starting for the last few weeks. He's up against the Roosters, and the Cowboys are 18-point outsiders, but it's going to be torrential rain most likely, and he's about $67 to $81 on most bookies' first try scorer. So that's my tip, Griffin Neame to crash over first or last. You can find that sort of 67 to 81 price tag on most bookies. It's been an amazing last couple of weekends. Magic Round started it, but since then we've hit Hazelton, Cook, Fisher Harris, and Haas. 4 picks between $41 and $67 in the last 2 weekends. So finally, we're back. Enjoy the footy, guys. Cannot wait for State of Origin. Google Wiki Linktree, as always.
Love that from Nicole. And not only did he hand out a try scorer tip there, he might have changed my tip for this game. I did not know it was going to be torrential rain. Maybe you do give the Cows a chance in torrential rain, man, to limit the Roosters a bit, given the Roosters play so free-flowing.
I love that energy from Nicole. You can see that he's invigorated by having some of these winners. You know, the way that Nicole tips with all these real long shots, you can have dry streaks because you can pick a bloke for first try, second half, or first try. He might score second, you know what I mean? And it's 80 to 1, or, a put down or a obstruction call. It's quite sensitive. But obviously, when you do hit a couple of these long shots, it really can help out the bankroll. So great to see Nicole back on track. And I meant to make that point too. Like that would be the only other reason I wouldn't play the Roosters would be there should be showers on Sunday. And if I was the Cowboys, I'd be doing rain dances to try and bring that on, because that is probably their best chance to not get blown away. Because again, we've got a Roosters side that's as red hot as anyone in the comp, and you've got a Cowboys team that hates defending.
Hates playing in Sydney, makeshift side, missing a lot of players. The rain is probably their only friend in this one. For those that did join us late, Winnie, would you mind just recapping your best bets one more time before we close the show?
Sure, mate. Sharks plus half a try, handicap $1.8365. Ryan or someone asked, would you play 2.5 if you can't get on 365? I would. I don't mind Sharks plus 2.5, but I like the try handicap a little bit more because I lean to the try handicap when I think I've got the inferior kicker, which would be the case here. I've seen Trindle miss a couple of doozies this year where Moses, I guess it depends on his preparation with the foot, but you'd assume he's, comes in the better goal kicker. Then the next day, Dogs under 3.5 team tries, $1.80, also 365. I'm taking Penrith minus 3.5 on the second half line at 185, and Finns minus 3.5 at $1.90. Get that while you can. Sporties, lads, and Neds.
Perfect, mate. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you very much to our viewers for their viewership. We will see you Sunday within 15 minutes of the final kickoff to recap those best bets for you and all the action. Next week, we'll have an Origin special followed by a regular NRL show, and we'll recap it all like we do every single week. So have a great week from myself. Thank you very much, and over to you, Winnie, to farewell the show.
You didn't hear a mixed matchup. I've gotten a habit of negotiating that the day after the pod just because we are pressed for time. I share that with reasoning in the group, but you always find it under Rugby League Markets on Top Sport. TP Live is the code if you still want a toppy account. We had Origin chat the final 30 minutes of our recap. So if you've just finished this pod, you just want to hear a bit more chat, especially Origin opinions, go back to our recap show if you're not a regular listener. But again, we'll be back to you on Sunday, 6 p.m. to recap round 13, the 5 games. And then, as I said before, in 7 days' time, we will be here at our regular time slot of 5:30, but it will be an Origin dedicated special show. And that means the round 14 preview will move to Thursday night, where you get an extra pod next week, where, of course, Origin 1 will be in the books. There's no footy on Thursday night, but it also gives us some idea of who will and won't back up. So I hope you guys have a great week. Hopefully we can stack a couple of winning weeks of the best bets. Let us know what you think, as always. And we'll see you on Sunday. Lego!